We dive into a full game preview of the Baltimore Ravens Week 1 matchup with the New York Jets with a very special guest next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostrecker of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. That includes over on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is who covered the season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here. It's a Purple Friday. I have my purple on. It's light purple, but it counts. I promise. And here with us to dive into a full game preview of the Ravens and Jets matchup is Sarah Ellison of the Ravens Vault. She also was the former editor over at the Ravens. You might have caught her work over there before with Late for Work and some other things she worked on and created over there. Sarah, I'm super excited to have you and super excited that we have football back overall.
Oh my gosh. It's just like, it's a different life when the NFL football season is going. You just always have something, exciting and something looking forward to on the weekend. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to be back with football, and I'm excited to talk to you, Kevin. We've been, following each other on Twitter for a while, and it's good to finally talk camera to camera.
Exactly. I'm super excited for this. And this is a season that has a lot of excitement around it for the Ravens. It feels like 2021 was almost a lost year for them with all the injuries, like a what could have been situation. They come into this year, Sarah, I think with just the revenge factor on their mind. Really, you look back to what Chuck Clark said at the end of the season, just watch how we bounce back, leaves the podium. And I think that's carried over to what they want to do this year. But before we get into a preview, Sarah, I do want to just talk about some things that have developed over the past week or so. I know the final roster came out last week, a very busy week for Baltimore with just moves all around. What were some surprises to you on that final cut down day? Because there were a couple for me.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise is how thin they left the outside linebacker room. And obviously they have a plan to figure that all out. But yeah, I was a little surprised, and I just kept thinking that they would go and sign a veteran and not a veteran like Fackrell. Do you know what I mean? And he could be good. I don't know a ton about him. He seems to have, he's a veteran that has a big, track record, has some experience underneath him. But I think myself included and Ravens fans thought that might be a little bit more. But it seems to me that the Ravens are standing pat. They feel like Bowser, to me, they're acting as if they feel like Bowser will for sure be back week 5. And then reinforcements coming again later in the season with Ojabo. So that was surprising. All the rest was just mildly surprising. They cut Beatty, but then they ended up getting him back. They really ended up bringing everybody back to the practice squad that they wanted to, minus Tony Jefferson. So Tony Jefferson, even though he signed to the Giants practice squad, also I think he's got a better chance of playing over there rather than here in Baltimore, where the safety position, other than tight end, is probably one of the deepest. They kept an extra tight end. Again, that's mildly surprising. I didn't predict it, but I mean, this is a tight end centric passing game. So looking back, it's like, why wouldn't they have done that? That's just so Ravens.
Yeah, the Josh Oliver keep, I guess, was a little surprising to me, but I mean, he's been with the team for a couple years now. He understands the playbook, understands the system, so it does make sense. And you mentioned Tony Jefferson. A lot of people talk about how the Jets are kind of like the New York Ravens. Well, the Giants over there with Don Martindale, they get Tony Jefferson and Chuck Wiley and Tyree Phillips even, and they kept 11 offensive linemen initially, which I think was a pretty big shock to me overall. But Sarah, when looking at the injuries here, I mean, it's pretty night and day from where the Ravens were last year versus where they are this year. I mean, the first injury report comes out. You don't have like a book report to read. You have 4 names on there, 3 of them who did miss most, if not all, of the year last year. Really, Travis Jones is the only one where you have a new injury that you're dealing with. And they haven't released their final one yet. That does come out today. But I think, Sarah, in terms of guys like J.K. Dobbins and Marcus Peters and Ronnie Stanley, do you have a feeling as to maybe how many of those guys will play in this game? Do you think all of them have a chance to suit up? Do you think they might just take it the cautious approach and maybe suit them up for week 2? Where are you with that?
So I think out of those 3, Marcus Peters is the most likely to play. He seems to from the very first day he was back. Just the videos that were the small videos. I mean, we're not seeing him hit anybody, but he doesn't seem to be favoring his knee. Seems to be moving smoothly. Marlon Humphrey was asked about this Wednesday. Marlon said that, Marcus came up to him and was like, "Hey, if I look bad, you got to let me know." And Marlon's like, "Bro, believe me, I would tell you, but there's nothing to tell you. You look fine." So Marcus Peters is the one I have the most confidence in. That doesn't mean he's going to be 100% right off the bat. So I was leaning towards J.K. Dobbins playing week 1 on a low pitch count, but I feel like Lamar Jackson made me doubt that with his comments yesterday or Wednesday. He said that, he's looking good. He should be back within the next couple of weeks. And I was like, oh, I thought we were talking about this week. So now I'm doubting the J.K. Dobbins. I just thought he might because he's been practicing for so long. He's been back even before Marcus Peters. And even though he didn't look to be 100%, it seemed like he kept getting better. And I thought they would just give him a chance on a pitch count. I'm doubting that now, but it could still happen. And then Ronnie Stanley's the one that I feel like there's just not even a reason to do it. He's only been back for this week of practices 1 week. If it were the Super Bowl or the playoffs, go ahead and push for it. But it's week 1. The NFL season is a marathon, not a sprint. This is why they're paying Juwan James. This is why they're paying backups like McCary. They're paying him, pretty decent money for backups, and it's to fill in for a game or two. Obviously, I wouldn't feel comfortable for the whole season. And so that's why you should do it. It's the Jets. I hate to look down on them, but they aren't the scariest opponent like the Bills or something like that. So it seems to me there's no reason to rush back Stanley. Go ahead and give him a 2 to 3 week ramp up period. And hopefully these guys can fill in the meantime.
Yeah, and my order is the exact same as you. I do think Marcus Peters has the best shot. It just feels that way out of all the guys who have practiced. J.K. Dobbins, yeah, kind of like a 50-50 iffy-ish chance. And Ronnie Stanley, I agree. The practice time thing is the kicker for me in terms of, he hasn't been practicing for that long. So why would you, I don't want to say rush him back because I don't think they are doing that. But to be able to, and we saw him last year go out there on the ankle in week 1, and he wasn't great. He clearly was limited by it, and that didn't help him. It didn't help the Ravens. So you don't want to put them on the field in a situation where, that they're going to risk a re-injury, and also their play isn't going to be up to the standard we know Ronnie Stanley can go up to, or Peters or Dobbins. So it's interesting. I would assume Travis Jones doesn't play unless he logs at least a limited practice this week, but it feels like he's probably going to sit this one out, which is unfortunate because of the preseason he had, but you want to, again, take the cautious approach there. But Sarah, it feels like we've been talking about the Lamar Jackson contract situation forever, and the deadline's coming up. It is today. So if something doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. The talks will be tabled. I think that's the right call with the season coming up. Do you have any inclination as to whether something will get done today? It's literally like the come down to the wire last minute thing. What are your feelings?
Well, I was already resigned to the fact that it wasn't going to happen before week 1. And then Lamar just kind of cracked the door of hope open again when people asked him, the media basically assumed, hey, we're in the week 1 practice. You've totally turned your focus. So obviously the deadline is passed. And he's like, well, we're still talking. The week isn't over yet. So I'm like, are you trolling us, Lamar, again? Are you trolling us and giving us a glimmer of hope? So he gave a glimmer of hope. I'm not going to take the bait. I still think it's not going to happen, but hey, I'm happy. I'd be pleasantly surprised if it did. But I think, at this point, say come Friday, it's just time to move on. And I mean, listen, if the Ravens are going to come to him in week 5 and give him everything he wants, fully guaranteed and everything, and Lamar's not going to be like, no, I said week 1. You know what I mean? If they blew him away from an offer, it could still get done. But at this point, from a media perspective, from a fan's perspective, after that Friday, it's just you wish that it had gotten done. It didn't. So let's just move on to football. That's what Lamar's trying to do. That's what I think we should do. And then revisit it in the spring. And it's going to be not fun. I'm sure he's going to be tagged until, and that doesn't mean he'll for sure play on the tag. But at that point, after Friday, I'm moving on to football. And unless we hear otherwise, that somehow the Ravens blew him away with an offer and he accepts it. Otherwise, it's all football from Saturday on out.
Right. And, you don't want a situation where it's like week 2 and, not that this would ever happen, but, someone comes out and says, hey, Lamar, let's not do this workout. Let's go talk about the con. You don't want that. And not that that would actually happen. But I think for a situation like this, and I've talked about it a little bit here before, Sarah, the fact, and Joe Flacco actually did talk about this, the fact that he hasn't signed yet is similar to what Joe Flacco did in 2012 when he turned down the extension. He said he wasn't necessarily betting on himself, but it's almost similar in the fact that, hey, Joe Flacco went out there, he won the Super Bowl, made himself so much money. And with Lamar Jackson, this is a what have you done for me now lately league almost. So people don't remember the great start, or at least most people. I know you and I do. Great start to the year last year. Had that like MVP signature game against the Colts and was in that conversation. But then you go to the Miami game and the cover zero game. And from then on out, you missed the Chicago game, missed the final couple games with the injury. If he was able to come back this year, Sarah, and lead this team to the playoffs, be in that conversation of the MVP again, make the AFC Championship, make the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl, while, again, he might not be necessarily betting on himself, by proxy, he's making himself tens and tens of millions of dollars, especially with how big of a contract this is. So with every quarterback extension we've seen, I think it's been a win for Lamar Jackson. I think the price of him has continued to go up. And so he's doing what he can. I mean, he has a number that he wants to get paid. The Ravens have a number they're willing to give. I mean, that is what contract negotiations are, just basically. So for him, I don't anticipate something getting done on Friday. I agree. If you get into Saturday, I'm just moving on to football and we'll revisit it in the spring. But, there's that glimmer of hope, as you mentioned. So maybe it does happen, but I'm not banking on it here right now. But we'll head into our first break on the show. Coming up, we'll be diving into the offensive preview for the Baltimore Ravens and how they go up against that Jets defense. So be sure to stay tuned for that. We still have a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about LinkedIn. And as you gear up for the fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. I've used LinkedIn for a ton of things in my life. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. There are simple tools you can use like screening questions. You can make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. Why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back here with our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Sarah Ellison of the Ravens Vault. And Sarah, this game against the Jets, again, not the scariest team in the Jets, but it's any given Sunday in this league. You can't discount anybody. And on the offensive side of the ball with Lamar Jackson on the field, such a dynamic player. We've seen the body transformation from him coming in with a lot of muscle on him. Now, some of that will naturally probably come off as the season goes on. But what are you expecting from him in this game? Do you expect one of those 5 touchdown performances in week 1 like we saw in Miami in 2019? Or how do you think he's going to come out and perform? Because it's a year for him that's really big.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to come out of the gates and really impress people. It seems like he always comes back from the offseason improved from the year before. And that's saying something for a unanimous MVP, to just see that he can continue to find new ways to get better. So it'll be interesting. I'm excited to see how the offense attacks the Jets with, Rashad Bateman going to his second year. I want to see how they use the 2 or maybe 3 tight end sets with Likely and Andrews and Boyle. All of that. And then also, what is this running game going to look like for Lamar? Those read options just weren't as threatening with the running backs he had last year. It was just like, here, let me just, wherever they go with this, I'm keying on Lamar first because he's the dangerous one. And we can catch up to these older, slower running backs if he happens to, hand it off. So, I think, as you said at the top, I think that this is the Ravens coming back with a vengeance. That was the word that Eric DeCosta used all offseason. I think everyone from Lamar Jackson to all the other injured players, the defense, everybody is like, you forgot about us. You forgot about us. And it was because of all those injuries, but I don't think that people are going to be able to sleep on them for much longer. I think that Lamar is going to be in the MVP conversation from the beginning. Every year, whether it was he was a rookie, takes him to whenever he's healthy, he takes the Ravens to the playoffs. Last year, he was playing at an MVP level despite losing so many players, despite becoming the seventh heaviest pass happy team in the NFL. And that's completely scratching who the offense was. He had the team in number one position in the AFC in December, despite all that was going around him. So you've got these reinforcements coming back, even though they're not all quite 100% yet. Yeah, I'm expecting big things. I think he's going to play at an MVP level this year, starting with the Jets.
And I think when you look at even the end of the year when he wasn't in there, when it was Tyler Huntley, you were looking at 1-point losses, 2-point losses because of 2-point conversion fails. So they were able to, even without their star quarterback in there, with the pieces they had, and some of those guys are returning, some of them not. But I think it just goes to how the team fights, and that's a whole nother thing. And I think that embodies Lamar, this super hard worker, competitive guy. And that's something also I think the team feeds off of that. They feed off of Lamar Jackson's competitiveness, which I'm really excited about. But Sarah, we did talk about J.K. Dobbins a little bit. Assuming he's not able to go, or assuming he's on some type of a very limited pitch count, I'm a lot more confident this year than I was at this time last year with the depth they have. I mean, if you're talking about guys like Latavius Murray and Le'Veon Bell, Devonta Freeman in 2016, that's an all-pro team, but we were talking about 2021, so it wasn't as good. I mean, the offense itself, the rushing stats, weren't the worst, but if you were watching the team, it just wasn't what we were used to in terms of guys with J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards out there. Kenyon Drake comes in, explosive back, coming off an ankle surgery, so we'll see how that works. Mike Davis has been with the team through the offseason, Justice Hill back as well. How would you anticipate that running back rotation going if Dobbins isn't able to go or is on that pitch count?
Yeah, I'm interested in this. So prior to bringing in Kenyon Drake, the Ravens running back room was unimpressive to me in the preseason. Which is one of the reasons why, again, I didn't predict it, but I wasn't shocked that, Tyler Beatty was cut because they were bringing in somebody else. And so, granted, Lamar Jackson wasn't out there with them, and Lamar Jackson opens up the running game for sure as people try to read that mesh point. But I don't want it to be that the running game is better because of Lamar only. That's why you hope that JK can regain his form eventually this season. So I haven't gotten my eyes on Kenyon Drake yet, but I do know that he fits the mold of the rest of this Ravens team because he's coming off a foot injury himself. So he's probably coming back with the vengeance himself. He had, I believe, 3 seasons in a row where he had over 1,000 total yards, both rushing and passing. So he can help in that pass game also, which I know the Ravens wanted to emphasize last year, more passing to the running backs also, but just couldn't do it after they lost so many players. So this is one area that I am interested in. It's a little bit more of a mystery to me because I haven't seen Drake. I don't know what his chemistry is with Lamar. That takes a minute. You got to be a running back that just, you got to have a feel with Lamar on, is he going to keep it or do I have it, So we'll see. We'll see what that's going to look like. That is one thing I'm definitely interested in. But I do think the Jets, the weakness of their defense, their front seven, I don't know that they're built to stop a run game, as many teams are not. They're usually built to beat more pass-happy teams. So I'm hoping this is an area that Lamar Jackson, Kenyon Drake, Mike Davis, all these guys can exploit and get moving, whether JK's out there or not.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think Baltimore is going to put a heavy emphasis on getting the ball to their running backs out of the backfield in the pass game last year. We heard guys like J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards talk about it a lot, and then unfortunately that was kind of taken from everybody because of the injuries, and they had to kind of revamp everything. But you're right with the Kenyon Drake thing because he's coming into the situation I think that Murray and Bell and Freeman were coming into last year, where Davis and Hill have been there for the offseason. They've had the time in the offseason. Last year, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards go down like 10 days before the season starts. They have to scramble to bring guys in. How's the mesh point looking? It took some time. So it's interesting. Maybe Mike Davis will be the lead guy. I think Drake is the more talented running back if both guys are healthy and caught up in the offense and everything. But maybe it takes a couple weeks for him to get fully acclimated to the offense. So we'll see. And obviously, you're right. Lamar Jackson does open up that run game in such a huge way. You can't understate that impact. But I think, Sarah, when you're looking at the wide receivers, Rashad Bateman is the clear number one. He's going to go up against Sauce Gardner, and that matchup itself is intriguing. But there are also the other guys that you're looking at, like Devin Duvernay, James Prochet. They bring in Demarcus Robinson, who had, I think, one of the nastiest double moves I've seen in a really long time in that preseason game against the Commanders. It was unreal. How do you think this is, though? Because there have been arguments now, Sarah, that Demarcus Robinson is now the wide receiver 2 after one preseason game. We didn't get to see a ton of Devin Duvernay and James Prochet with them dealing with certain things throughout the offseason. How do you think the Ravens are going to utilize these guys?
All right, so a couple things. Number one, I want to see the Ravens attack Sauce Gardner with Rashad Bateman right off the bat. The big line that we all know, stat line about Gardner is that he's never given up a touchdown in his career. I think that's the one. So let's do this. He's a rookie. This is his first game. Let's test him. Let's see if he transitions straight from college football into pros and is still that high. And maybe he will be. But I say test him, try to catch him off guard, because he's the new shiny Corvette, right, on the Jets defense. And if you can break him early, then that could be, a crushing to the morale of the whole defense as a whole. So I'd like to see them test that. As for whether Demarcus Robinson is wide receiver 2, listen, why not? Because to me, I get it that we didn't get to see Prochet in the preseason, so I don't really know what he's capable of. He always has excellent training camps. He's got great hands. I love his attitude. I love his personality, all of it. The Ravens people always say, I want the Ravens to give these young guys a chance. They're giving them a chance. They did not bring anybody in. They did not bring any veterans in until Demarcus Robinson prior to that third preseason game. And when have we seen, and again, it could still happen, but we never saw Devin Duvernay or Prochet or Tylan Wallace do anything close to what Robinson did with a few days practice. And yes, Robinson's a veteran, but like, that's the point. Like, we just haven't seen it from these guys. Haven't heard about it reported on from training camp, where they just like are able to consistently do stuff and stat games. So that doesn't mean I've given up on those guys. Obviously, injuries hindered Prochet, but availability is part of this. It's part of the equation, and they've gotten their chance. So why not give it to Demarcus Robinson, who puts on these veteran double moves, and maybe it's against their third stringers. But again, I haven't seen the other wide receivers do it against other teams' backups. So why not? So I see, again, this is going to run through the tight ends. This is going to run through the tight ends. It's going to be Andrews is still target number 1. Rashad's number 2. Likely's probably going to get the third most targets. Then you're talking about the fourth. So that's Demarcus Robinson or Duvernay or Prochet. So we may be putting too much into this topic anyway, but I don't see why not. I feel like he earned it in a couple of days. And if those other guys compete and show that they deserve it, then they can win the wide receiver 2 position back, in my view.
Yeah, and I think for Robinson, it's almost like a sigh of relief he was able to go out and do what he did, because you're right. He was going up against second, third, fourth stringers. Where in Kansas City for the past 5 years, he was doing it against number ones and making those. I mean, against Baltimore, he loves playing against the Ravens. He multiple catches, multiple touchdowns. So you want to see him go out there against guys who are either at the back end of a roster or not even making the roster with the Commanders and do what he did. So that was an encouraging sign. But you're right, Sarah. This does go through the tight ends. There's no doubt in my mind about that, and I completely agree. Mark Andrews is, I think, the number 1 pass catcher still on this offense. He's just so talented. But I know everybody is waiting for how this team is going to utilize Isaiah Likely. And that starts this week. And you get to have kind of like the Andrews Likely duo on the field for the first time. I mean, what do you think that's going to be like?
I'm hoping it's like Christmas. I mean, Likely was Christmas the preseason without Andrews out there. So now, and I think he's going to benefit from so many people all over Andrews. They were all over him last year. He still came up with 1,300 yards. I mean, just a phenomenal season from Andrews. So if Bateman steps up and becomes more of a target, and then Likely, with Andrews and Likely both having a feel for how to get open, it's going to be bananas. I mean, I'm hoping it just opens everything up, because last year you could just really focus on Andrews. If Bateman can if Likely can step up, if some of these running backs can step up, this offense, I think, has a chance to return to being, top 7, top 6, top 5, maybe more. It can be explosive. I just cannot wait to see what they do with Likely.
And it's so great because he's able to line up in so many different areas. You can put him in line, you can line him in the slot, out wide
Yep.
also. So it's
He could
almost
be
like
X,
where you,
sure.
right, you put him out there. He could be wide receiver 2 if you want. You can put everybody. You can put so many people on him if you're a defense. But he's this huge guy, has the speed. We saw the contested catch ability in the preseason, the ability in space as well.
The yak.
He's someone who has so many traits to him, just again, without even playing a regular season game yet. He's just dominated so much in the preseason. He didn't even have to play in the 3rd preseason game. The Ravens rested him for a 4th-round rookie. That's impressive overall, because you also saw Kyle Hamilton get the rest, but he was the 14th overall pick, so you almost maybe expect that a little bit. But I think for Likely, I'm super excited to see him. We'll head into our final break here on the show. Coming up, we'll dive into the defensive side of the ball for Baltimore, talk about how they match up with a familiar face in that Jets offense. So be sure to stay tuned for that. We still have a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week's games. BetOnline is also your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. So head to the website today, use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here with our final 7 of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking here with Sarah Ellison. And Sarah, there are plenty of storylines in this game. I think the biggest one, or one of them at least, has to be Joe Flacco suiting up against this Baltimore Ravens team. We've kind of known about it, but not really. It hasn't been confirmed for the past couple of weeks after Zach Wilson went down in the preseason. It's reported, or Robert Saleh actually said, that Wilson is going to miss at least the first couple of games here for the Jets. So it's Flacco in the driver's seat, a player that means so much to Baltimore in so many different ways. But now in this game, he's going to be a player that the Ravens are looking to stop. I mean, how do you think Baltimore matches up with Flacco, who obviously had his run in Baltimore, but is a little bit more up there in age and hasn't had the consistency we saw early in his career?
Yeah, I think against the Ravens, Joe Flacco is actually more dangerous than Zach Wilson was going to be. Zach Wilson, is in his 2nd year, but he didn't get to finish his full rookie season with injuries. I thought the Ravens and their defense and their disguises with Mike McDonald could probably rattle Zach Wilson a little bit more than they can with Joe Flacco. Like, even if the Ravens start strong on defense against Flacco, you're not going to rattle him. He's Joe Cool for a reason. We all know that. So even if you get a couple of plays, you gotta be smart with him. I think that Flacco, as an older age, doesn't have a high ceiling, but has a very high floor, and is, for the most part, going to make smart decisions. So I think that he works well in this offense that they brought over from San Francisco, and it's kind of that Kubiak Shanahan kind of tree with bootlegs and all of that. We all know how well Joe Flacco played under Kubiak's system here in Baltimore. And he's got lots of weapons. There's question marks, just like the Ravens have question marks with his weapons, but he's got 3 dynamic receivers. They brought in new tight ends. They really like to run 12 personnel also. They've got running backs. I know that their new rookie running back, forgetting his name, Reese, Daniel Jeremiah, had him picked as offensive rookie of the year. So Ravens got to watch out for that. Joe likes to do the checkdowns to his running back. So he's got lots and lots of weapons. Where the Ravens can really exploit the Jets is not even let Joe reach his weapons. Their offensive line is improved. The Jets' offensive line is improved, especially at the guard position, but they've had injuries and are doing some Ravens-like shuffling with the tackles. So Odafe Owe and Justin Houston, and whoever else they bring out, Calais Campbell, I don't know if they elevate Steven Means or whoever. So the key is to get pressure on him so he can't even utilize those weapons. But I will say this, listen, Joe Flacco cheered him on and 1,000% grateful for that Super Bowl win. When he gets put into the Ravens Ring of Honor, I will be celebrating that. It's the right move to make. But for those 3 hours on Sunday, I know that there are some Ravens fans that are conflicted. Kevin, I am not conflicted. Let's unleash Oweh. Let's unleash Houston. Let's pressure him. Never wishing injuries on anybody, especially Joe Cool. But my goodness, I have no problem rooting against him this Sunday.
I know this almost pains me to say because I'm almost like one of the leaders of the Joe Flacco as elite club. But for those 3 hours, Sarah, I don't think he's elite. I think that's the one ever time where Joe Flacco just might not be elite. But then once the game is over, I'm like, hey, Joe Flacco is elite again. It was all fine. But I think for Flacco in particular, I agree with you. I think Zach Wilson would have been the easier, I guess, quarterback to play against if you're the Ravens. Because I agree. I mean, the rookie, second year, third year quarterbacks who haven't seen the Ravens disguises before have generally struggled. I mean, you look at Joe Burrow in his first game against the Ravens. That was one of the worst games of his career. Now, the other two, that's a different story, but that had a lot to do with the Ravens secondaries, just where they were last year. Justin Herbert last season, even. He was a guy that was in the MVP conversation coming into that game. Still had a great year, but he really struggled against that Ravens defense. The Ravens blew out the Chargers. So I think for Joe Flacco, he is that veteran. He's been there. He's done that. So we'll see how it ends up going, but definitely a storyline to watch out for. But Sarah, you mentioned the outside linebackers. We talked about it a bit in the first time, and you mentioned it again here. It'll be interesting to see how they're creative with them. I think Stephen Means is likely going to be elevated. I would be pretty shocked if he wasn't. You mentioned Calais Campbell maybe playing a big edge. Maybe Malik Harrison gets some time at the Sam position. I know John Harbaugh talked a bit about that. I mean, how would you go about just making sure that you don't run it off Oweh and Justin Houston into the ground? Because they're talented, but they can't play 100% of the snaps every single week.
Right. And I'm more concerned about Houston just because of his more advanced age than Odafe Oweh. I mean, this is it. This is the concern heading in. I'm willing to give the Ravens the benefit of the doubt with Mike Macdonald. I know that Mike Macdonald in Michigan ran a little bit more of a 4-3. So I could see the Ravens leaning into that a little bit more, and that's why they get Calais out there. And by the way, Calais was cracking me up on Wednesday's pressers. They were like, how do you feel about moving out to their edge if needed? And he flashes this huge grin. He's like, oh, yeah, I like going out on the edge. You mean you and I going to get blocked by tight ends? Yeah, tight ends can't block me. No tight ends in this league can block me. So he's obviously confident. John Harbaugh also mentioned moving Patrick Queen out there. I don't know that would happen all too often, but that's kind of intriguing to see, his speed out there and maybe what they could do there. So I'm giving for the moment. I mean, I'm certainly concerned, but I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt for the moment with whatever plan they've concocted. They certainly don't act desperate. I'm willing to see how Mike Macdonald does this differently from Wink Martindale. I mean, obviously he won't be blitzing as much. He'll be disguising more. And this is just it. This is Odafe Oweh's time. This is it. I mean, look, the Steelers, the Ravens are really known for lots of rotations, but the Steelers don't do that. They play their guys all the time. So it's not unheard of. Odafe Oweh could handle it. You would prefer to have that, but this is a temporary solution. And listen, I don't know if I'm going Peter King, where he predicted that Oweh ends up number 2 in, defensive player of the year voting. That would be a massive year. But yeah, I'm expecting a big jump. Let's double his sack production, and let's start it against these tight ends tackles who are not, the top notch of the league. And let's just get this thing rolling.
Yeah, Mekhi Becton for them, serious injury there. So that one of their top tackles already out. Dwayne Brown's been on the injury report here this week. So I think this could be a big coming out party for Odafe Oweh. And it's funny, we're talking about these breakout players, and really the two big ones on offense and defense are the two 2021 first rounders in Rashad Bateman and Odafe Oweh. So you're looking at that. I also think, Patrick Queen's an interesting one. The inside linebacker position is one where I'm interested to look and just see how guys like Queen and Malik Harrison respond overall. But Sarah, in the secondary, you have so much talent in the safety room with Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams and Chuck Clark there. Geno Stone even factoring into that corner-wise. Still to be seen if Marcus Peters does play in this one. But you have Humphrey coming back, and he obviously is looking for his standards, a better year than last year. I mean, he's still one of the best in the league, but I think from his standards, a bit of a down year from what people saw from him over the first years of his career. But I think two big X factors for me in this, well, I'll say three X factors in the secondary, especially in the cornerback room, Sarah, are Kyle Fuller, Brandon Stevens, and Pepe Williams. Those three guys, if the Ravens have to rely on them in a big way because they have to ease Peters back into action or someone goes down, I think that's super important. And look, the Jets have talented wideouts, Corey Davis, Elijah Moore. They drafted Garrett Wilson. How do you expect the secondary to go up against the Jets wideouts?
Yeah, so I definitely feel like those wideouts will test them, especially if they are going in like 10 personnel rather than 12 or whatever, and they're just going all out with these wide receivers that they have. But look, this is supposed to be the strength of the Ravens, right? They have so much cap dollars and other assets like the first round draft pick on Hamilton. So you want this to be your strength. And while the Jets do have good weapons, the Ravens are going to see much harder rosters going forward. So this is a good little starting out of the gate test. Listen, to me, this all hinges on Marcus Peters. I do love Pepe Williams. I think he's going to have playing time. I think he's going to be a contributor, and I do think he's going to be great, but he is a rookie. So he won't be, at least I'm not expecting him to jump out like we expect likely to, you know what I mean? So you've got Fuller there. I want to see Pepe, more in the slot, and I want to see Hamilton used as kind of like this gadget as they can just move him around. He's got great vision. He's got great range. He obviously in the preseason needed to take better angles on his tackling. But to me, the X factor is Marcus Williams. If he's good to go, then you can put everybody else in the exact positions that you want them to be in. Pepe coming in here and there for Fuller, in the slot. You can move Marlon around as you please. You can use Hamilton as a gadget player. You can have Marcus Williams in there, having Marcus Peters back as a legit free safety. And so Marcus Peters can take those gambles that he likes to take based off of what he's read and seen on tape. So to me, it's Marcus Peters' health that's the X factor, and that would unleash all the talent in the rest of the secondary.
Yeah, it's almost like what you're talking about on the offensive line with how Ronnie Stanley and his health kind of unlocks that offensive line because of how good he is. Well, Peters, with his football IQ, the Ravens were tied for 29th in turnovers last year. I mean, they missed him in a big way in that secondary. And I agree with Marcus Williams. They haven't really had that deep safety presence since Earl Thomas in 2019 on the field, where he was good. Like the off the field stuff aside, the on the field production of Earl Thomas was really good in 2019. So to have that player to be able to roam the back half of the secondary, play in that single high will be super, super important for them overall. And against this Jets team that has those talented pass catchers and with Joe Flacco out there, I think having that guy who you're kind of worried about, he can cover most of the field. He has range, so I'm excited about that. But Sarah, let's get into a final score prediction now. This Ravens team has, they've beaten teams they were supposed to lose to. They've lost to teams they're supposed to beat. Right now, mine has been 30-17 with the game looking closer than it actually appears. Like a late Jets touchdown gets them to 17. So I think this will be a Ravens win, and I think in pretty dominant fashion, but it might be the box score looked closer than it appears. Where are you in this game?
Yeah, so I'm coming up with this off the top of my head. So, I'm still waiting to see how that running back group is going to look, but I do think it's still going to be high scoring. I could see 28 to 17, 28, something like that. Yeah, I mean, I definitely see a win. I definitely see a win that won't be one of those, giving you a heart attack at the end. At least I hope not. How many of those did we endure last year? So I don't foresee any heart attacks. So I can see like a 28-17 type deal.
Yeah, the 2021 Ravens, the heart was never still when watching that team with how close those games were last year. But this is a game that I think it's important for the Ravens to start fast for the season. And so you get a team in the Jets who, you're right, it's not the Buffalo Bills, still an NFL team, still very talented, but I think the Ravens do pull out this win. But Sarah, I appreciate you hopping on with me here today. Thank you so much. And you're doing the Ravens Vault over there with Bobby Trossett, a very big friend of the show. Tell us what you got going on over there.
Yeah, so the Ravens Vault is, like you, a daily podcast. We do every morning at between 5 and 6 a.m. We try to post a kind of just fully packed news roundup on the Ravens. We typically try to get that done in 15 minutes. So that goes up every morning between 5 and 6. Then also we do some analysis. We have guests, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, check us out there. And then I'm also on Twitter, as you can see there, at SG Ellison.
Yeah, and so the links to Sarah's work, obviously her Twitter as well, will be in the description below on YouTube. So check it out. Subscribe to the show. It's a really good 15-minute episode. You get all your Ravens news there. It helps. You can get the 30-minute version, your 50-minute version there. There's so much great Ravens content out there, and I'm really excited about all of it for this year. But Sarah, again, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here on Monday, we'll be recapping everything that happened in that Ravens and Jets matchup in week 1. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here on Monday.